Hello, and welcome to Opt to Thrive, episode 17 10 Happiness Hacks That Can Change Your Life.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
So, actually, today, it's actually a bit of a blustery day out there. It's a bit weird. It's like 30 degrees now. I think it was a bit hotter earlier. It's on a Saturday, kind of early afternoon. It's a bit gray and there's been rain. I'm in the sunroom and there's been rain spluttering on the windows, and it feels to me like a North American Christmas. The kind of Christmas that I grew up with, well, it's not cold out there, but I've got the air conditioner on and I'm, nice and chilly in here with the raindrops, and, we're getting into the holiday season. So it's bringing back a little nostalgia. I also have a pumpkin pie baking at the moment. And so the house is filled with this beautiful pumpkin pie smell. We're going to talk a little bit more about why I'm doing that in a minute. And I've been playing some Christmas music. Yes, I'm one of those people. I really enjoy the holiday season, and probably stems from, a lot of idyllic kind of wishes as a child. But there you go, sharing that nostalgia with you. So at the time I'm recording this, I'm about a week off of Thanksgiving in America. And it just so happens that I was thinking of doing this little segment on happiness, and it just seemed to be a really good time to do it right around Thanksgiving. So some of you are probably wondering why I'm even thinking about Thanksgiving, given I live in Australia. I've been here for nearly 25 years. Let me just explain. Now, I might just explain a little bit about Thanksgiving because Aussies do ask me from time to time about it when the subject comes up, and they're often wondering what it is exactly. What are we celebrating in America when we have Thanksgiving? So if you don't know, in school in America, we're taught that Thanksgiving comes from the original American colonists called the Pilgrims. They landed at Plymouth Rock, and after settling in through some very harsh conditions, they had a very successful harvest. And what we're taught is that the Pilgrims and the Indians shared the land and they enjoyed this successful harvest together. So they broke bread and they shared the bounty of their labors, of the harvest, and they gave thanks for all that they had. Now, of course, there's debate around what exactly happened way back then. It was like in the 1600s. Just like, pretty much everything else these days, there's debate around everything. But the holiday has been celebrated since the late 1800s. So on the fourth Thursday of every November, people gather with their families or, people close to them, people that are special to them, and they share a huge feast and give thanks. The Canadians also have a Thanksgiving. Theirs is celebrated in October. And I did not know this, but I just had a quick little Google search out of curiosity. And Wikipedia tells me that St. Lucia and Liberia also celebrate Thanksgiving. And also unofficially, apparently, Brazil, Germany, and the Philippines do too. So I did not know that. It is one holiday that I do continue to celebrate here in Australia, which I know probably sounds a bit weird, but it is one of my American traditions that I still celebrate. And, I probably would have given it up by now, given that, the kids are grown and out of the house and, it's not an Australian holiday, but there is no way I would be allowed to give it up now because maybe close to 10 years ago, I had a Thanksgiving where I invited my close girlfriends and their families. And so since then, we every year now have Thanksgiving, and there's no way that we can't not have it. They absolutely love it. And every year we just kind of go from house to house, like change the location. And we take turns making the pumpkin pie, which is very fun. There's no canned pumpkin here, which is often how pumpkin pie is made in America. We actually have to use a pumpkin. I do remember when I first got here wondering, well, how am I going to make pumpkin pie? There's no canned pumpkin. Turns out butternut pumpkins are very, very good for making pumpkin pie. And we also take turns making the green bean casserole and the candied sweet potatoes. And often, most years, we have a different maybe guest that hasn't joined us before. And they always find it pretty fascinating, I think is the word I'll use, when not only the pumpkin pie, but the candied sweet potatoes. They really have a hard time getting their head around them. My husband in particular really hates pumpkin pie, which is kind of even hard for me to say because that feels really sacrilegious to even utter those words. How could someone not like pumpkin pie? But as I said, a lot of Aussies can't get their head around it. They consider pumpkin a vegetable, and it's weird be a vegetable being made into a sweet pie. And I suppose it's like me and Vegemite. I fed it to my two little Aussies when they were growing up, but I myself never developed a taste for it. So I guess it's kind of like that. I think it's kind of funny, really, that I've married this true blue Aussie bloke who, by the way, my Canadian BFF, we just were chatting on Zoom yesterday, and my husband had popped in and said hello, and she told this story about how she considers him to be a real-life Crocodile Dundee. So, in fact, when I finally got him to America, which took some time, he's not a crazy traveler like I would like to be, and probably will do a lot more of as I get older. I finally did get him to America, and he couldn't help himself, but, kind of one-up me the entire time. I took him to Central Oregon, where I grew up, and we were over this beautiful, very picturesque lake surrounded by the pine trees in the mountains. I mean, really, it's like a postcard. And there were two bald eagles kind of soaring in the sky. And I thought, really, how much more American can you get? Like this, what an experience. He wasn't impressed. He then told me, I got this whole lesson on the wedge-tail eagle and how on all the reasons why it's just so much tougher and better, essentially, than the bald eagle. Took him to see a baseball game, which, was, again, pretty lost on him. But yet he can sit through, agonizingly for me, days of cricket. So a lot of things might be lost on my Aussie husband, and, pumpkin pie is one of them. As I'm recording this, as I said, my house is filled with spicy, sweet scents of pumpkin pie, and I am absolutely loving it. I'm in the spirit, and I am ready for tonight, which is the night that we're going to celebrate our Thanksgiving. One of our traditions, and I practice this in America as well, and I think a lot of families or gatherings do practice this tradition, that we go around the table and everyone talks about what they're most thankful for. It's one of my favorite things, and that brings me to number 10 on my list of essential skills for happiness. Now, these aren't really in any particular order. They just kind of came out as they came out. Number 10 is gratitude. And we know there's a lot of evidence to back up gratitude. The research tells us that it's linked to life satisfaction and general happiness. And there's lots of ways to feel and express our gratitude. We can be thankful for things, for people, experiences, our health. We can be thankful for these things that happened in the past, the things that are happening now, things that are going to be happening in the future, or that we're optimistic for happening in the future. I do think that gratitude comes more easily to some of us than others. I think it probably comes pretty naturally to me, thankfully. I'm grateful for that. I do find gratitude easily for really super simple things. Like, I don't drive a super fancy car, but I have driven enough shit bombs in my time that I quite often marvel at how comfortable my car is to drive and how dependable it is. Especially in the winter when I put the seat and the steering wheel warmers on. Those are just such a treat. And it really, I can just sit there and just be so grateful with my toasty hands and my toasty tush. I know I've become a bit of a wimp. It might be all of 8 degrees Celsius and I've got this big grin on my face because I'm so nice and toasty. I also know what it's like not to have a washing machine, and it's not infrequent for me to find myself at the clothesline. Yes, I still do not have a dryer. I never got one, never got around to getting one. And so I still hang my clothes on the clothesline. In Australia, it's pretty easy. They dry pretty quickly most of the year. And there are times when I can just smell the cleanliness of the clothes. And I just take a second to just be grateful that I have clean clothes, that I can wash my clothes anytime that I want to. If this isn't you, if, gratitude doesn't just pop into your head at, simple things from time to time, we do know that regardless of how naturally gratitude does or doesn't come for someone, it is definitely a quality that anyone can build. And again, an evidence-based quality. So I do hope that if you're listening to this, that maybe you'll take a second to just be grateful every day for maybe 3 things. That's a good practice to start. Okay, number 9, self-validation. Now, this is a skill that took me many, many years to learn. It actually took me lots of years just to realize it was something that I needed to do to protect my happiness, to maintain my happiness, to keep myself from having some bigger lows than I needed to have. For way too long, I gave away the control of my own happiness to other people, needing someone else to tell me I was doing it right, whatever it was. Now, I know I'm not alone here. I appreciate I was set up good and proper by my upbringing to look for validation, but it's pretty common even for those who haven't had the same upbringing. From early childhood, we're often taught that our worth is based on the approval of other people, and this can be seen in our educational systems, expectations from our families, and through our social interactions. Now, an element of approval seeking is normal. After all, we are tribal people, and fundamentally, we are terrified of being rejected and kicked off the island. It's natural human behavior. But when your happiness is dependent on the approval of others, this is going to cause you some problems. Learning to have your own back can be so incredibly freeing. It doesn't mean you don't care what others think. It means that you value what you think and you appreciate that we don't always have to agree. That's okay if we don't agree. It's okay to have your own opinion, and it's okay if it's different than those of the people that you love, admire, respect, or care for. It's one of the things that makes life so fun and interesting and exciting. Number 8. This is bringing me to peaches. I love this one. Again, this one comes from my good friend, Brooke. Not really. We don't know each other. Maybe one day I'll get to meet her. But this comes from Brooke Castillo. I've mentioned her probably multiple times on this podcast. She's from the Life Coach School, and she taught me this one. Actually, she's probably taught me a few of these. When it comes to being disliked and being really bothered by being disliked, she likens us to peaches. You could be the biggest, juiciest, sweetest peach on the tree, but it won't matter if someone doesn't like peaches. If they don't like peaches, they don't like peaches. That's it. Let it go. Leave it with them. Sometimes people just don't like peaches, and it's nothing to get upset about. Not everyone is going to like us, and that's okay. Not everyone likes peaches. That's kind of flows nicely into number 7. I'm not here to make anyone happy, and no one else is here to make me happy. When we put the responsibility of our happiness onto someone else, we are in a very precarious position. Not to mention, it's not very nice to try and make someone else carry all of that responsibility, don't you think? Happiness is truly an inside job. I'll never forget the day I gave my husband the bad news that I'm not here to make him happy. He was perplexed, to say the least, but I think then a bit relieved that I wasn't holding him responsible for my happiness either. It doesn't mean we don't do things that we know delight and bring joy to another person. It just means that that's a bonus, that for the baseline happiness, they've got to sort that out as do we ours. Number 6, life is 50-50. I think I've said this multiple times before, but I'm going to say it again because, man, it's a good one. 50% of the time, life is neutral to good to mind-blowing, amazingly wonderful. And the other 50% of the time, it's neutral to not so great to shitstorm horrible. When you wake up and things look and feel a little gray today, nothing has gone wrong. This is how it's supposed to be. And if you can catch yourself from going down the hole, why do I feel this way? What's happening? And instead just remind yourself, nothing's gone wrong. This is the way it's supposed to be. If every day were rainbows and daisies, then rainbows and daisies would just be some colors in the sky and a few weedy plants. Contrast is important, even if we don't like 150% as much as we do the other. Embrace the not so great because better times are coming. Number 5, spend some time working out what your values are. Getting really clear on what you truly value in life makes a lot of decisions and a lot of boundaries much easier to make and keep. It also makes it a lot easier to back yourself when you know you're acting within your values. You don't have to second guess yourself. I would suggest, if you've never done this kind of work before, that you Google Brené Brown's values exercise. It's a free resource you can access online. And in case you're one of the few people left on the planet who haven't heard of Brené Brown, she's what I would call a social scientist. So she's an author, a speaker, a podcaster, and a researcher who has researched some really fun topics like shame, vulnerability, empathy, and courage. She does a bit of work on these values, and I think it is well worth your time in having a look. Number 4, practice acceptance. They are who they are. It is what it is. We have no control over any other humans, as much as sometimes we think we do, and often we try really hard to. Nothing good ever comes from trying to control the actions of another human being. Giving someone the cold shoulder, being super sweet, nice, acting in any way with the sole purpose of trying to get someone else to do, say, or behave in a certain way is, bottom line, manipulation. It makes us feel like we have some control, but we do not. It is an illusion. In the best interest of your happiness, believe people when they show you who they are the first time. If you want or don't want something, use your words and tell them. They then have the choice to do what they wish. You then get to decide if that's good enough and whether you want to engage or set a boundary. If it's a circumstance, not a human, that you do have some control over, then by all means, don't accept anything you don't want or truly have to accept. You can change it, accept it and stay, or accept it and leave. If you really have no control, then see it for what it is. It is what it is, period. I think we spend way too much happiness and energy wishing and resisting what is when there really is no upside. Number 3, watch your sneaky brain. Work out what thoughts are causing those unpleasant feelings that may be keeping you from your happiness. I guarantee you that if you're human, your brain is thinking thoughts that you are probably unaware of, or you haven't actually taken the time to challenge. We cause ourselves a lot of unnecessary suffering just by believing some of the nonsense thoughts our brains are coming up with. I've said it before, if you don't like the results you're getting in your life, it is very much worth taking the time to examine your thoughts. I covered this more in episode 5. If you change your thoughts, you can change your life. So if you want some more information, go back and have a look at that. Well worth the time. That episode talks about the thought model. One of the other things that happens along the thought model are feelings, which brings us to number 2. Feel the feels. A lot of us spend a lot of time and effort doing whatever we can, eat, drink, exercise, work, have more sex, in an attempt not to feel how we feel. This is huge. This one skill can save you so much secondary unhappiness from the effects of the things we're doing not to feel the original unpleasant feeling. Comfort eating, over drinking, overworking. Once this skill is developed, you'll be able to sit with the feeling and let it pass through you, and then it's done. No after effects from the too muching of the other things. For some of us, this is a skill we can do on our own just by being aware of what is happening when we reach for another glass of wine or a sleeve of Oreos, asking ourselves, what do I really want? Because it's not the wine and it's not the Oreos. What am I feeling right now? You can ask yourself why too, but don't spend too much time there because sometimes that why was programmed unconsciously so long ago, it can be really slippery and hard to nail down. And most of the time, it doesn't really matter why. It's the what are we going to do about it now that is most important. Some people get so stuck on the why, they keep themselves from moving forward. So please don't do that. For those of you who are stuck, and you feel like you need some help and support feeling the feels, then I would suggest seeing your GP for a referral to a psychologist or a skilled mental health professional who can help you do this. And now we come to number 1. Drum roll, please. Now, this one, I do think this is in order. I think this one truly deserves the top spot as number 1. You ready? I want you to hear me when I say this. Believe that you are worthy. You are worthy just because you were born. You were born worthy. You do not have to prove your worth. No one can give you worthiness. No one's approval means you're worthy. You are worthy just because you are you. Please believe me on that one. Okay, so I'm just going to recap. Number 10, practice gratitude. 9, learn to self-validate. 8, remind yourself that some people just don't like peaches and that's okay. Number 7, free yourself and others from being responsible for anyone else's happiness but our own. 6, remind yourself that life is 50-50. 5, work out what your values are and live into them. 4, practice acceptance. 3, be aware of and challenge unhelpful thoughts. 2, feel your feelings rather than try to out-eat, drink, shop, or sex them. And number 1, remember that you are worthy just for being born. I hope that this has been helpful for you. And if you can think of someone else who it might be helpful for or who might get something out of it, please pass it along. And rate and review the podcast. I have slowed down on ratings, guys, so please do rate the podcast. It's good feedback for me, and also it makes the podcast more visible for people who are looking for this information. So I would sincerely appreciate it if you'd give it a rating and maybe even a little review and just let me know how things are going. You can find me on social media at Opt to Thrive on Instagram and Facebook. Please feel free to drop me a DM or a comment. I put lots of hopefully helpful and useful information on there as well to help women through this midlife period. Again, my sole purpose in doing this whole podcast thing is to inspire, motivate, support, and educate. So those are my goals with the podcast, and I really try to live up to that with the social media as well. Lots of things are happening in the background, and hopefully I'll have some things to share with you in the weeks to come. I will see you next week, and until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts for medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.